There are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And then there are polls, which sometimes are reliable and sometimes they're not. A poll is basically a questionnaire in which you hope the respondents don't lie. You choose the respondents to be as representative as possible for the area surveyed and then try to extrapolate the data obtained to the area in question. Now it sounds dodgy, but it's usually the best way to determine general trends in lieu of a market-based mechanism. I mean, if you want to determine which kinds of phones people prefer, there is a market-based mechanism for that. We just look at the sales figures as people already polled themselves by voting with their wallets. It's harder to do that though when it comes to political preferences or correlations of those preferences with other non-market-based aspects of human life. So, we're stuck with polls. A poll that says right-wingers have happier sex lives is what we're discussing in this episode. Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Now I've come across something that I never thought it can ever exist, namely a fair and balanced article about a contentious topic written on Buzzfeed. Now I did comment on this article a bit in one of my Voice of Europe podcasts, but I'd like to expand a bit now since not everyone listens to my long podcasts and also because not everyone religiously follows left-wing rags like I do. Anyway, so BuzzFeed titles, "Very right-wing people are happiest with their sex lives." Now, the article is rather short, so I'll read it in its entirety. Quote, "People who describe themselves as very right-wing are the most likely to be satisfied with their sex lives, according to a survey carried out across 5 European countries by the polling company YouGov. The survey of more than 19,000 people in the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Denmark, and Sweden, shared exclusively with BuzzFeed News, found in most countries sexual satisfaction increased the further right you went along the political spectrum. In the United Kingdom, people with left-wing politics were least likely to describe their sex lives as satisfying, with 66% of the people saying they were, versus 73% of those saying they were very right-wing. In all 5 countries in the survey, it was the people with very right-wing politics who were most likely to be pleased with their sex life, though in every country except Germany, people on the center-right were less likely to be satisfied than centrists. The study also showed that in Britain at least, people with right-wing and very right-wing politics were markedly happier overall than their left-wing counterparts, but this trend did not replicate across Europe. The research was carried out for the new edition of the book Sex, Lies and the Ballot Box, published on Friday. Joe Twyman, YouGov's head of political and social research, warned against changing your politics to improve your sex life. There are obviously numerous facts that might explain an individual's sexual happiness, and this study does not suggest that changing your political views would make you happier in bed, or on the stairs, or on the kitchen floor, in the shower, and on the back seat of the car, he told BuzzFeed News in unexpected detail. The old rules about correlation not equaling causation always apply. Being very right-wing doesn't make you sexually satisfied, but nonetheless, these results suggest it is in contrast to at least some stereotypes popular in the political world, those on the very right wing of the political spectrum who enjoy their sex life the most. And that this finding is true across a number of different European countries. Okay, so let's put our speculative hats on and try to understand this issue. And by that, I mean, of course, delivering to you my privileged white cis-het conservative male opinion on it. Anyway, first of all, it is true that correlation does not sine qua non imply causation, and that moving yourself further to the right doesn't necessarily lead towards a happier sex life. After all, only 3/4 of those on the far right were happy about their sex lives, which leaves a full quarter of far-righters who are still as miserable as the majority of leftists. However, the remaining quarter can also be the newer contingent joined recently as the generalized leftism that is normative in most of Europe has started to unfold for the utter degeneracy that it actually is. Now, if I am correct, then it's only a matter of time until they'll get happier, namely until this new contingent starts to fully incorporate the newfound values of the right into their personality. Now, of course, butthurt leftists who are butthurt about these results allege that the respondents simply lied, implying that only right-wing respondents lied, whereas the left-wing ones were honest because leftists care whilst rightists don't. You know, the usual self-patting on the back that goes on endlessly on the left. But this can't be true consistently across 5 countries with so many respondents. I mean, it is a possibility for sure, but it is very unlikely. You know, when you have 2 explanations, you should err on the one that requires the least amount of faith. Believing that all right-wingers in the survey across 5 countries conspired to lie to make the left look bad requires the kind of enormous faith that I simply don't have. So, under these circumstances, I am tempted to believe that the results are largely correct. Yeah, sure, maybe not 73% of far-righters are happy with their sex lives. Maybe only 68% are happy. And maybe not 35% of far-leftists are miserable. Maybe just 32%. The point is that it does make sense that far-righters have happier sex lives and are generally happier in life. And it makes sense for this to be true in the case of those who think of themselves as very right-wing, as opposed to those who think of themselves as right of center, which oftentimes means being the lapdog of the left, which is namely that, for instance, advocate capitalism, but heaven forbid doing it whilst explaining that no, you're not entitled to your gay wedding cake because more discrimination. You know the types. Sometimes they're referred to as conservatives, and for bloody good reason. It completely makes sense for far-righters to be happier as opposed to far-leftists, and the explanation for that comes from Thomas Sowell's seminal work, A Conflict of Visions, which I think it should be mandatory reading for everyone, both leftists and rightists. Now, I won't bore you with long quotes from the book, so I'll explain it succinctly to you. Basically, there are 2 grand big visions about the world. The unconstrained vision and the constrained vision, or as I like to call them, the utopian vision versus the tragic vision. Now, the unconstrained or the utopian vision is basically the Jean-Jacques Rousseau vision, which starts from the premise that man is fundamentally good, free, and perfect, and that all evils of the world are the fault of institutions and systems. As a result, the only way to ameliorate and eventually eliminate evil from the world is to tear down institutions and replace them with other institutions led by the right people. As such, if you have the right institutions in the right place and with the right people leading them, then utopia would arise. Now that's the unconstrained vision to which the overwhelming majority of the leftists do subscribe, whether they've read Rousseau or not, or whether they're even aware that this vision is called the unconstrained vision. Now, the constrained vision, or the tragic vision, starts from the exactly opposite premise, that man, or human nature, is fundamentally flawed, far from perfect, and operating within natural constraints. As such, most evils of the world are the result of inherently imperfect institutions built by inherently imperfect men. As a result, the best way to ameliorate evil from the world is to gradually try out system and through a gradual process of trial and error reach to an acceptable state. The primary drive of the tragic vision is that perfect doesn't exist, utopia does not and cannot exist, and that some degree of evil will always exist within human civilization and the world at large. The best we can hope for is to ameliorate as much of that evil as possible and understand that there are no perfect solutions, but only trade-offs. Now, as a result of this mentality, to which most conservatives do subscribe, whether they realize it or not, and whether they even know how to read, let alone having read Thomas Sowell, the immediate result of this mentality, especially amongst European and North American conservatives, is that there is such thing as good enough. Another result of this kind of mentality, which again has consistently been present amongst European and North American conservatives for at least 100 years, is the general propensity towards contentment. Contentment is something of which all people are capable of, but it is mentality dependent. The more revolutionary minded you are, the less likely you are to be content in your life, no matter how good you may have it. The less revolutionary minded you are, the more likely you are to put things into perspective and develop a generalized feeling of contentment with your life. Now, throughout the last 150 years, the left has always been revolutionary. They want to abolish the family, abolish the very notion of sexual dimorphism amongst humans, use the state to regulate sex to levels unimaginable even amongst the most hardline, evangelical, theocratic-leaning Christian conservatives, and they want everyone to be forced to care about their pet projects, whether they want it or not. So when you're constantly under that mentality that every you guys out there is a cis-normative patriarchal slur, that every unexpected romantic kiss is basically rape, that every father mentoring his daughter is basically an act of oppression, and that every white couple is basically an oppression bomb ticking, when you're under that mentality, is it any wonder that your sex life sucks? Is it any wonder that you're starting to miss the good things in both your life and the life of others? And mind you, this applies generally too. When all you do is agitate for social justice, believing in the most retarded conspiracy theories imaginable, is it any wonder that you're getting progressively less happy? See what I did there? When all you do is agitate for more taxes, allegedly to help the poor, and focus on the most extreme, exceptional, and non-normative examples to make your case, is it any wonder that you're starting to miss the fact that most of even the poorest of the poor in both Europe and North America are actually richer than the upper middle class of your grandparents' generation? When your motto is paradise now, is it any wonder that you miss the fact that the poor young person you're seeing today is actually very likely to be significantly less poor 1 year from now? And by missing that, is it any wonder that you're getting progressively less happy? I will dare to argue that it is no wonder that it makes absolute sense for leftists to be generally more miserable, both in their sex lives and their lives in general, when compared to far-righters. Now, mind you, that's not to say that miserable rightists and joyful leftists don't exist. Of course they do. I mean, I know I have my fun with a genuine Bolshevik, the kind of chap that believes North Korea is an ideal society, and no, I'm not joking, but he's the most fun chap you can think of. Sure, when it comes to serious debates in the political arena, I do wipe the floor with him, but after that, and that is after he loses, we have a lot of fun at the after party and make jokes about helicopters and gulags. And his wife is stunning. I mean, stunningly stupid when it comes to her mind, but otherwise stunning, and I have no doubt that my Bolshevik pal has very good sex with her. By the same token, I know a few miserable rightists who are always pissed off about something, thus missing the fun part of life, and his wife is a conservative activist. And given how much they work, both to put food on their table and with their activism, I very much doubt that they have any sex at all. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that such people don't exist, but overall, it does stand to reason, once one understands how the leftist and the rightist minds work, it does stand to reason that generally rightists will be happier. Oh, one more thing. I mean, particularly on the sex life point thingy. Rightists in general tend to believe in monogamy. Now, not all rightists believe in the sanctity of marriage, mind you, despite what the left-wing media will tell you. But with that said, I have yet to personally meet a right-winger who is not in some sort of a cohabitation agreement which basically functions like a marriage but avoids all the legal hurdle, which is a lot easier to accomplish in continental Europe than in the United Kingdom or North America. Anyway, long story. What I'm trying to say is that rightists are a lot less likely to adopt a pump 'em and dump 'em mentality, a lot less likely to consistently have multiple sex partners or to be in open relationships, which is the left-wing term for tolerating cuckoldry, and are also a lot less likely to end relationships on a whim. Basically, right-wingers tend to have sex with people for whom they care deeply, whether they're married or not. Whereas left-wingers tend to think that sex is not that important, and thus it is not so relevant to be committed in some way to the person you're having sex with. Over the long run, such a mentality leads to unhappiness. I mean, it is a cute mentality during one's teenage years and early 20s, but once you go over the age of 25 or 30, such a mentality is almost a guarantee towards unhappiness. I mean, sure, there are exceptions, but not very many of them. So yeah, this difference in approaches to sex may also account for the difference in happiness about one's sex life by political leanings. Alright, I think we've had enough with this topic, so please do drop a line in the comments and tell me where do you think I'm wrong, or maybe you have other possible explanations for this phenomenon. Maybe I'm missing something. Make sure I'll be reading. And with that being said, thank you for watching, and I guess I'll see you soon on Freedom Alternative.